Cowboy Bebop defines itself as a sort of cultural companion to Star Wars. Its screenwriter, whose name is Keiko Nobumoto, was fascinated with a sci-fi subgenre that Star Wars had popularized in the late 20th century, which came to be known as the space opera. Star Wars had a highly stylized vision of spacefaring civilization that features princesses and wizards and a hero's journey through the gauntlet of cosmic destiny. This kind of mythic fantasy is cut from the same narrative cloth as something like Wagnerian opera, and thus it has very little to do with life as we would know it if humanity ever migrated beyond the boundaries of the Earth. But Keiko Nobumoto wanted to translate the narrative elements of a Star Wars adventure into a vision of spacefaring civilization that was somewhat more grounded in the realities of urban life. And she decided to draw inspiration from a world musical tradition to articulate that goal in the same way that George Lucas did. Just as George Lucas would create Star Wars as a so-called space opera, so too Nobumoto would create Cowboy Bebop as something she called a space jazz, because she regarded jazz as the music of city life. That's why she called the series Cowboy Bebop. Bebop is a kind of small band jazz that placed a greater emphasis on the speed and improvisational complexity of its instrumental performances. Every episode of Cowboy Bebop was meant to embody that ethos with its layers of back-alley intrigue and narrative tangents where its cast of characters would wind in and out of scenes with one another, sometimes playing off each other and other times turning on a dime into a solo adventure. But of course, the premise of Cowboy Bebop also draws some of its inspiration from another American cultural tradition, namely the Western, which of course is the home of the cowboy narrative archetype. But there's really only one place where anyone ever appears in an actual cowboy getup in Cowboy Bebop, and that's the so-called Big Shot television program, which is an in-universe news bulletin whose purpose is to broadcast the latest news to bounty hunters across the solar system. It's the main thing that Spike and Jet use to conduct their freelance bounty hunting business. The narrative archetype of the bounty hunter is really a staple of the Western genre. The bounty hunter gains relevance in a world where traditional agents of the state, like sheriffs or the army, find themselves unable to enforce the law all by themselves. And so instead, freelance vigilantes have to chase down the criminals on their behalf. That was the general condition of the sparsely populated American frontier as imagined by the Western, and it's also the condition of the spacefaring society imagined by Cowboy Bebop. This is a world where empires don't colonize space so much as smaller business communities. Smaller governments also exist in this world, but they're more like city-states, and they have the same level of influence as, larger corporations or big criminal organizations. And all of these entities find themselves turning to the same pool of bounty hunters to do their dirty work on various occasions. There's an interesting title card in episode 5 where Keiko Nobumoto directly explains to the audience the reason why she wanted Cowboy Bebop to revolve around bounty hunters. Her reasoning takes us back to a point I made a little bit earlier, that Nobumoto wanted Cowboy Bebop to be a kind of cultural companion to Star Wars. This just wasn't a world where Jedi wizards or princesses or soldiers of empire can really exist, because Cowboy Bebop is more space jazz than space opera. And so the notion of freelance bounty hunters who investigate all the various walks of human life as ordinary people among ordinary people is much better suited to the jazz-inspired vision of street life in space that Nobumoto wanted to create.